Okay, I'm basically vibrating after watching the 8th episode of Andor, Narkina 5. It may have been my favorite so far, but really I think that's because of so much of the groundwork laid by the previous episodes, and now we're finally starting to see characters and storylines coming together. We are in the back half of the season, everything is starting to take shape, and I'm loving it. We pick up where we left off with Cassian as he is shoved into a transport to the planet Narkina 5. The shuttle ride and the build-up to the actual set of buildings and one prisoner worrying they'll never breathe free air again, and then introducing the electrified floors. It all does a fantastic job of displaying how hopeless the situation feels. The Empire is so proud of this massive building and the technology they've put in place to keep their prisoners under control. I'm sure they can't imagine that prisoners would ever be able to rise against them, and right now I can't clearly see how it will happen, but that just means it will be even sweeter when it eventually does. Cassian is assigned to a work group in a factory facility where Andy Serkis of all people tells Andor the quote, rules of the game they play. There are 7 men at each of 7 tables in the room. There are 7 rooms on the 7 levels of the factory. His table competes against the 6 others in the room, and the room itself competes against the other 6 rooms. Productivity is encouraged and evaluation is constant during this 12-hour shift. This sounds awfully similar to some of the horror stories that come out of Amazon warehouses, or it sounds like Squid Game, which makes sense. I think that series and this arc of Andor are going to have similar themes. The Empire and the prison guards represent the rich and powerful. They don't want the people they rule over to rise up against them, so they pit the people against themselves. The most productive table gets some menial reward, in this case it's flavor in their food. The least productive table gets electrocuted. If the Empire makes the workers fight over scraps, they'll start to resent one another. They'll be too focused on defeating the other workers to think about working together to figure out how to defeat the people who are actually oppressing them, who actually have what they need, but just toss out the bare minimum to the people they deem to be the winners. And then we have Serkis's character Kino Loy, someone who has done something to warrant a little extra power. He's still a prisoner, but he becomes part of the oppressing force of the Empire for, I assume, some added benefits. He is grateful for whatever extra scraps he gets, and so he pushes his room to make sure he gets to keep them. He's a continuation of Skeen's character and what he believed in episode 6. If you're stuck in a hole, the only way out is to climb over somebody else. That's what Loy has done. But obviously we're going to build towards a prison break, and we'll see how the prisoners all work together to overcome the Empire's technological terrors to win. We can see the start of that when Cassian sees one of his teammates using sign language to communicate to a completely different group of prisoners. Back in their cells, the rest of his team ask about PORD, the new directive set in place by the Empire that doubled or tripled all of their jail times, the directive that was announced as a direct consequence for the heist on Aldhani. The prisoners don't know what actually happened, they just know they're being punished for rebel activity, and they're not happy about it. Which is understandable, but it's another example of an oppressed group blaming their allies instead of their oppressors. The only one of the group that seems to understand is Melshi, who was great to see. He will wind up joining Cassian on his final mission to Scarif. But for now, he knows that PORD means nothing, really. The Empire will keep its prisoners as long as they want to. They jailed Cassian for no reason. They'll keep him jailed for no reason, too. Now let's jump over to the Empire's part of the story, because Dedra Meero has finally met Cyril Karn, and the ISB are finally searching for Cassian in their attempts to capture Luthen, who they've codenamed Axis. He is the center of the organized rebellion as far as they are concerned, and Dedra gets Cyril to give her more information. He doesn't have much, really knowing his voice is the only potentially useful thing he can offer. I think it's interesting Luthen might be caught because he called out for violence and told Cassian to kill Cyril, but for now Cyril is left back at the Bureau of Standards. He pleads to be of more help and is turned down, but he lets out a little smile at the end. Maybe it's because he got to be of service to the Empire, or maybe he knows they will need him down the line. I think that's likely. We haven't seen the end of this team up. I think the Empire will return to him after they struggle to find Cassian in their own prison. They strengthen their hold over Ferrix, installing more surveillance equipment, and there we catch up with Bix and Brass Paso. They're looking after Marva, who is sick and got herself hurt trying to open up an old floodgate that might hold a secret tunnel underneath the hotel which is serving as the Imperial base. I wonder if that'll be important in future episodes. They're being watched by Vel and Cinta, who are also looking for Cassian at Luthen's request. Cinta plans to stay on Ferrix and just wait for a lead, while Vel is sent away so they don't draw too much attention. I think she is losing her taste for the spy world. She wasn't pleased about Clea's lack of empathy for the loss of her team on the heist, she wasn't happy about being ordered to kill Cassian, and now she can't even be with Cinta, who she loves because the revolution is getting in the way. I think a large part of this series, which very much lines up with the philosophy of Star Wars, is about finding balance between total devotion to winning a revolution with remembering the people the revolution will affect. Last episode, we saw Mon Mothma chastise Luthen for provoking the Empire, and he shrugs it off. This episode, we're seeing Vel struggle with becoming an assassin while Cinta accepts it freely. We also get to see Cassian learn firsthand how their actions on Aldhani had consequences he never expected, which I think will open his eyes to how his actions also hurt his community on Ferrix, leading him back home once he escapes. Bix uses Pax's communication system to contact Luthen to try to tell Cassian Marva is sick, and Luthen just shuts down his entire operation on Ferrix. He turns his back on someone that has served him as an ally before. He feels like he has bigger fish to fry now. He acts like Ferrix isn't worth his time or effort anymore. Instead, he pays a visit to Saw Gerrera. They verbally spar a bit, and Luthen pretends he wasn't responsible for Aldhani because he doesn't want to be honest and admit he's got 80 million credits, and then he tries to convince Saw to cooperate with another rebel, basically telling Saw to stop fighting with people who agree with him and start fighting with them against the Empire. On one hand, he's right. But on the other, he's being a little hypocritical. He isn't honest with Mon Mothma, he isn't honest with Saw Gerrera, he turned his back on Ferrix, and at the end of the day, he isn't able to convince Saw that this is the right move. I love Gerrera's speech about all the different rebel cells and factions in the galaxy and how they're all lost except for him. It's a good way to set up that this is the challenge of the Rebel Alliance. How does an alliance form and grow when it's made up of so many people from so many different cultures who all think their way of fighting the Empire is the right way? How do they set aside their differences and focus on the common enemy? Luthen knows that they'll all die with nothing if they don't put aside their petty differences, but he is also the type of person to use someone like Cassian and then order him killed, or to use Ferrix until they become a liability and then shut them out. I don't think Luthen is the one to unite all these factions, which brings us over to Mon Mothma, the woman who we know eventually does form the official Rebel Alliance. She's starting smaller, but she's building her own network. Her first ally, Tay Kolma, was won over through trust. She took a risk in the last episode, and she was honest with him. Episode 5 of this series was all about the importance of trust. Cassian decides to trust his teammates instead of follow Luthen's advice of keeping his mouth shut, and it works. Mon Mothma is able to build trust and loyalty, whereas Luthen keeps his secrets safely guarded even from his allies. And I brought this up in my episode 5 review, but the Clone Wars says the first step toward loyalty is trust. I think that's how Mon Mothma will eventually come to surpass Luthen. He might be the Axis for now, but he won't be forever. Mothma throws another little gathering to try and win some votes, and also as an excuse to speak with Kolma, who has such a good burn against Perrin. I loved it. Mothma's trying to get some money because she's about to get very busy, which is exciting to hear. She is going to be making some moves. She speaks with senators who debate Palpatine and his intentions, especially surrounding the PORD, and of course one of them says, "If you're doing nothing wrong, what do you have to fear?" And Mothma says she fears his definition of wrong, which is a great retort, but the fact is, we just saw that Cassian was arrested for literally no reason. The Arabesh on some of the prison data plaques said that people can be arrested for suspected force sensitivity. The Empire will make up reasons to imprison you. They will blow interactions out of proportion to make jail times worse. It's easy to say you have nothing to fear if you're doing nothing wrong when you're rich and powerful, because the rich and powerful apparently get to follow a special set of rules. And to be clear, yes, this is absolutely a commentary on the real world. We learn that Mon and Perrin were married at the age of 15 as part of Chandrillan custom. Obviously, we have seen how that relationship has turned out. We also see that Mon has lost her taste for some other Chandrillan traditions like their drinks with worms. I think we're seeing Mothma breaking away from seeing herself as specifically Chandrillan. It is a rich and powerful core world, but she's working to help not just the people of her planet, but the entire galaxy. She is going to unite all these rebel factions, many of whom are working in the Outer Rim, and I think she will have to break away from the false image that she has worked so hard to create as her cover. The final scenes I want to talk about involve the fallout of Bix's message to Luthen. I love how well the consequences are established. In Episode 7, Clea told Vel that sending a message is just as dangerous as receiving one. Then Dedra announced the extra surveillance equipment on Ferrix. So Bix's message was intercepted, Pac was punished for having the comm unit in the back of his shop, and Bix isn't arrested far behind. We see that Dedra is now on the planet, torturing away, and this is the point I have to stop rooting for her. That's all just a testament to the writing of this series. We get to know Dedra during her struggles. We even side with her because she's fighting characters we don't like. She has been presented as an underdog since Episode 4. It was satisfying seeing her win against Blevin last episode. But now she's winning against characters we do like, and it's not fun anymore. Now we have to face the reality that yes, she is just as ruthless as the others. She's manipulative, showing a tortured Pac to Bix and pretending she wasn't meant to see that. We've seen some very interesting parallels between the Rebellion and the Empire in this series. The ISB obviously has a far more comfortable life than the prisoners on Narkina 5, but the overall philosophy is very much the same. Gain more power by climbing on top of others. Beat the other people in the room with you to get more than they have. The rebel cells are operating like that as well. They're fighting with each other instead of uniting. I think the rest of this arc will show us a micro version of revolution within the Prison Break story, an illustration of cooperation against the common foe that will be a model for Cassian to look for in the future as Mothma has her own covert competition with Luthen. Man, this show is interesting. Again, I love this episode to death. It's not like it was full of action like the Aldhani heist, but I was riveted to the screen the entire time. With 4 episodes left in the season, it has been so satisfying watching some of the dominoes that were set up in the first 7 begin to fall. But I'm going to wrap up for now. Let me know what you thought of Narkina 5 in the comments. And come back at 6 p.m. Eastern to join our live after show, No Ifs and or Buts, to talk about everything I didn't cover here with Molly and our friends at Uplink Podcast. If you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the channel for all our Andor coverage, follow us on TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram, and consider checking out our Patreon page for our video reactions and audio commentaries for every new episode. And you can check out this playlist for all of our existing Andor content. As always, thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.